She sits across from you at dinner. You're talking. She's nodding. But something shifts in her eyes. You didn't notice when it happened. You thought everything was fine. It wasn't. Here's what most men never understand. Women aren't listening to your words. They're reading the silence between them, the hesitation, the confidence, the control. You think communication is what you say. Wrong. It's what you don't say that decides whether she stays fascinated or starts planning her exit. 5 phrases exist that bypass logic entirely and trigger something primal in her psychology. Not manipulation, not tricks. Pure emotional language her brain was wired to respond to since childhood. You've probably never used them, and that's exactly why you're confused when she pulls away. Words don't matter. They decide everything. Most men talk more when they're nervous. They fill silence with explanations, jokes, reassurance. They think volume equals value. But attraction lives in the spaces between your sentences. I'll show you 5 phrases that unlock her attention at a subconscious level. Not because they're clever, but because they signal something she's been scanning for since the moment you met. Confidence isn't about grand gestures. It's not about the loudest man in the room or the one who flexes his success for attention. True confidence reveals itself quietly, in the small, almost imperceptible actions that communicate presence. It's in the details you remember when everyone else forgets. The kind of awareness that proves you were actually there, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally engaged. That's the distinction most men never make. They show up, but they don't register. They listen, but they don't hear. They nod, but their mind drifts. Real presence is the difference between interaction and connection, and women notice it immediately, even if they never say so outright. Every woman, consciously or not, is constantly testing for this. It's not manipulation, it's instinct. She's gauging your level of awareness because awareness signals safety, intelligence, and emotional attunement. She mentions she drinks her coffee black, not as a test, but as a breadcrumb. Weeks later, when you bring her one with cream, you reveal something critical. You weren't really paying attention. It's not about the coffee. It's about your capacity to track details that matter to her. It's evidence of where your attention goes. Fail enough of those micro moments, and she quietly concludes that you're like everyone else. Pleasant, maybe even attractive, but not exceptional. The difference between being liked and being remembered lies in observation. She laughs differently when she's nervous than when she's genuinely amused. If you can't tell the difference, you're missing half the conversation. A woman's subconscious notices whether you're tuned in or just reacting on autopilot. Her brain has evolved over thousands of years to detect subtle cues. Who's a threat? Who's attentive? Who's oblivious? When you demonstrate that you perceive nuances others miss, you bypass her logical mind and speak directly to something primal. You're telling her nervous system, I'm present, I see you, you're safe. That's rare enough to be magnetic. Here's the psychology. Human beings categorize others almost instantly based on perceived awareness. It's not just social, it's evolutionary. The ability to notice subtleties once determined survival. In modern dynamics, it determines attraction. When you say, I noticed that about you, followed by a specific observation, something small but significant, like the way she always tucks her hair behind her ear when she's deep in thought, you communicate more than interest. You communicate comprehension. You're not seeing her as a generic woman. You're seeing her as her. That's what people crave, to be truly recognized in their specificity. Generic praise, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're funny, feels disposable. But tell her, you have a habit of pausing right before you laugh, like you're checking if it's safe to enjoy the moment. And she'll remember that line for years, because it means you saw her. This kind of attention activates mirror neurons in the brain, the same ones responsible for empathy and emotional resonance. When you remember something meaningful she shared, her mind interprets it as emotional investment. You're not just hearing words, you're storing fragments of her world. That act of memory is interpreted as value. It's the difference between he wants me and he values me. Wanting is biological, valuing is psychological. Anyone can want her. Very few can make her feel seen in a way that makes her relax into herself. That's the secret most men never uncover. It's not about pursuit, it's about perception. She tells you once, casually, that she never drinks vodka because it reminds her of her father. Too many arguments, too many unresolved memories. You don't comment, you just note it. Months later, at a bar, you order her a gin and tonic without asking, lime not lemon. It's effortless, unannounced. When she looks at you, pauses for a beat, you've triggered something deeper than appreciation. That's her recalibrating you in real time. In those few seconds, her brain is rewriting its internal file on you. You've just moved from someone she likes to someone who pays attention. It's a small action, but in her nervous system, it lands like gravity. She sits forward. Her phone stays face down. The conversation starts to shift from surface level to soul level. You didn't seduce her. You simply noticed what mattered. That's the paradox. The less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. The men who chase approval signal scarcity. They need her validation to feel enough. The man who observes from a place of calm certainty signals abundance. He notices, remembers, and acts accordingly, without the need for recognition. That's where delivery becomes everything. If you say, "I noticed that about you," with eagerness, like you're waiting for a gold star, it dissolves the magic. It becomes performance. Real confidence doesn't seek applause. It assumes awareness is natural. So say it casually, almost offhand. Not because you're indifferent, but because paying attention is simply how you move through the world. When you speak with that quiet certainty, she feels it in her body before she processes it in her mind. Her shoulders relax. She mirrors your tone. She might touch her hair, lean in, or tilt her head slightly as she looks at you. These micro movements aren't conscious. They're signals of lowered defense. Modern life has trained most people, especially women, to guard their attention, to filter out noise. When you demonstrate genuine focus, it cuts through all of that. You're not trying to own her attention, you're honoring it. That's intoxicating. Think about how rare that is. In a world where most interactions are transactional, where people scroll through conversations like they scroll through feeds, true presence feels revolutionary. Everyone talks, few listen. Everyone watches, few observe. To a woman, meeting a man who pays attention without an agenda feels almost foreign. It triggers both curiosity and comfort. She starts to wonder what else you notice, what else you understand without being told. And that curiosity is the seed of fascination. Presence is a discipline. It requires patience, restraint, and authenticity. You can't fake it because real observation requires stillness, an ability to slow down enough to see. That's why confidence isn't loud, it's controlled. The man who is secure doesn't need to dominate the space. He expands it by being fully there. His attention becomes an anchor. She feels steadier around him without knowing why. It's not about dominance or charm. It's about awareness expressed through subtle, consistent actions. Remembering the way she hesitates before making decisions. Noticing the shift in her tone when she talks about something that matters. Catching the small details others gloss over. That's the art of making her feel understood without declaring it. And here's the deeper truth. Women aren't impressed by perfection. They're moved by precision. When you remember something small, it tells her that she mattered enough for your mind to hold on to it. That's intimacy before touch, connection before confession. You didn't memorize, you noticed. You didn't perform, you registered. Most men chase moments to display charm. The rare ones create moments that linger in memory because they paid attention. That's what separates attraction that fades from connection that endures. So, when you notice something, say it with ease. Let it slip naturally into conversation, as if it's obvious you'd remember. Because to you, it is. You were there. You heard, you saw, you noticed. That's confidence, not in words, but in awareness. And when you master that, you become the kind of man whose presence doesn't need to announce itself. It's felt, remembered, and, most importantly, respected. And that's the foundation for everything that comes next, including the next phrase that separates genuine curiosity from dangerous obsession. Before we go any further, hit the hype button, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? But here's what most men get dangerously wrong with the next one. Silence terrifies weak men. They fill every gap with noise, jokes, stories about themselves, explanations nobody asked for. But women, especially intelligent women, don't want entertainment. They want to be understood. These 3 words do something radical. They transfer power. When you say, "Tell me more," you're not interrogating, you're creating space. Most men ask questions as a script. How was your day? What do you do? They're waiting for their turn to talk, not listening to answers. But when she says something that matters, mentions her mother's illness, her frustration at work, that strange dream she keeps having, and you respond with, "Tell me more," something shifts in the room. Psychologically, this triggers what researchers call perceived empathy asymmetry. Women are conditioned to be listeners. Society trains them to manage everyone else's emotions while suppressing their own. So when a man genuinely wants to hear more, not to fix, not to advise, just to understand, it violates her expectations. That violation creates magnetism. Here's the dirty detail. Watch what happens to her speech pattern. She was giving you surface-level responses. 1-sentence answers, polite but guarded. Then you say, "Tell me more," and suddenly she's talking faster, using her hands, making eye contact longer. She's testing whether you meant it, whether you're actually listening or performing interest. This is where most men fail catastrophically. They say, "Tell me more," then immediately interrupt with their own story. Or worse, they offer solutions. She describes workplace politics. He explains what she should do. She mentions family tension. He provides tactical advice. He thinks he's being helpful. She interprets it as, "He wasn't listening. He was just waiting to speak." The phrase only works if you genuinely shut up afterward. Let her fill the silence. Don't rush to respond. Don't offer fixes. Just hold space. Your job isn't to solve. It's to absorb. That's the skill most men never develop. Strong attention without agenda. Now here's where it gets psychological. Women equate listening with safety. If you can listen without judgment, she starts revealing things she doesn't tell other people. Not because you asked, but because you didn't interrupt. Watch her pupils. They dilate slightly when she feels heard. It's involuntary. Autonomic nervous system response to emotional safety. She leans in, drops her voice lower, shares details that should make you both uncomfortable, but somehow don't. You're not her therapist. You're not even her friend yet. But you've created the rarest environment modern women encounter, space without pressure. And she'll chase that feeling long after this conversation ends. But the third phrase is where most men destroy everything they've built. And what comes next will separate you from every other man she's met. This is the phrase that exposes whether you're actually confident or just performing it. Most men think they respect women. They open doors, pay for dinner, say the right things. But when a decision needs to be made, where to eat, which route to take, how to handle a situation, they default to control. They ask her opinion, then override it. Or worse, they don't ask at all. They decide and expect her to follow. "I trust your judgment," does something radical in her psychology. It transfers authority without surrendering your own. That's the balance most men can't achieve. They're either dominating or deferring, never collaborating. When you genuinely trust her decision-making, you're communicating. You're not decoration, you're a partner. But here's the dangerous part. You can't fake this. If you say the words but your body language shows hesitation, she reads it as condescension, patronizing, like you're humoring a child. Women have been patronized by men their entire lives. They can detect fake respect from across a room. The psychology here is rooted in autonomy theory. Human beings, especially competent, intelligent adults, need to feel their choices matter. When you constantly override her preferences, even in small things, her brain categorizes you as controlling. Not protective, controlling. There's a massive difference. Protective comes from trust. Controlling comes from fear. She suggests a restaurant you've never heard of. Most men would say, "Are you sure? What if it's bad?" Or immediately pull out their phone to check reviews. That's not caution. That's lack of trust packaged as pragmatism. Instead, "I trust your judgment. Let's go." Watch what happens. Her posture changes. Shoulders relax. She smiles differently. Not politely, but genuinely. Because you just did something rare. You treated her like an equal. Not in words, but in action. Here's the dirty detail nobody talks about. Women test this constantly. She'll suggest something slightly unconventional. Watching to see if you panic, if you need to be in control, if you can handle her having opinions that aren't pre-approved by you. Most men fail this test without realizing it was a test. They think they're being practical. She sees it as, "He doesn't trust me, therefore he doesn't respect me." And once a woman decides you don't respect her, everything else you do becomes irrelevant. But there's a line. This phrase only works if you're genuinely secure. If you're using it to avoid making decisions yourself, it backfires. Women don't want a man who defers to avoid responsibility. They want a man confident enough to trust their intelligence while maintaining his own. That balance is what drives them wild. You're not competing with her. You're not managing her. You're operating as a team where her judgment holds weight. That's so rare in her experience that it becomes magnetic. But the fourth phrase is where things get primal. But this next one activates something much deeper, and most men are terrified to use it. This phrase terrifies fragile men. Admitting she was right feels like losing, like surrendering authority, like weakness. It's not. It's the most powerful thing you can say, if your ego can handle it. Here's what happens in her brain when you say those words. Instant recalibration. Most men argue to win. They can't admit error. Even when proven wrong, they deflect, minimize, rationalize. "Yeah, but technically, I meant something else." She's heard this her entire life, from fathers, bosses, partners, strangers online. Men who would rather gaslight her than admit they misunderstood. So when you say, "You were right," clean, direct, no qualifications, it's so unexpected her nervous system pauses. That pause is where attraction intensifies. The psychology is dominance theory, but not the way most men understand it. Real dominance isn't about never being wrong. It's about being secure enough to acknowledge when you are. Fragile men can't do this. Their entire identity is wrapped in being correct. But strong men, they admit error without losing status, because their status isn't dependent on being perfect. It's built on being real. Here's the test. She predicted something would happen. You disagreed. It happened exactly as she said. Most men in this moment will say nothing, or make a joke, or change the subject, anything to avoid acknowledging she was right and they were wrong. But when you say it plainly, "You were right, I should have listened," watch her expression. First surprise, then something else. Respect. Because you just demonstrated you care more about accuracy than ego. That's rare. That's magnetic. But delivery is everything. If you say it defensively, like she forced it out of you, it becomes resentment. If you say it with humor, like it's no big deal, it's deflection. Say it seriously, calmly, without drama. Then move forward. Don't grovel. Don't over-apologize. Just acknowledge and continue. Strong men admit mistakes. Weak men hide from them. Here's the dirty detail. She wasn't even testing you. She made an observation, expressed an opinion, turned out to be correct. In that moment, you have a choice. Ignore it and hope she forgets, or acknowledge it and earn her respect. Most men choose silence. They think she won't notice. She noticed. She always notices. And she's cataloging how you handle being wrong. Because that's how she predicts how you'll treat her when things get difficult. If you can't admit she was right about a restaurant, how will you handle real conflict, real mistakes, real vulnerability? Women think in patterns. They're always extrapolating future behavior from present moments. This phrase tells her, his ego won't destroy us. That's not romantic in the movie sense, but it's deeper than romance. It's trust, and trust makes her feel safe. Safety allows her to open. Opening creates connection. Connection drives her wild. But the fifth phrase is the one nobody teaches men, and it's the most dangerous. So now you know. 5 phrases that unlock something most men never access. But here's what I didn't tell you. Knowing them changes nothing. Actually using them, with real intent, without performance, in moments that matter, that's what separates men she forgets from men she can't stop thinking about. When she looks at you tomorrow, what will she see? A man who read something interesting, or a man who finally understands what she's been waiting for someone to notice?